Smash that subscribe button if you dare, because once you enter this story, there's no turning back. Hit like, drop a comment, and hold on tight. The fog over Crescent City was unusually thick the morning the call came in. A correctional officer at Pelican Bay State Prison had been found unconscious, bleeding, and barely breathing inside the Secure Housing Unit, the SHU, a place meant to be the most controlled, most fortified, most isolated environment in the entire California prison system. No one was supposed to get hurt in the SHU. Not officers, not inmates, not anyone. But that morning, Officer Kyle Mercer was found lying on the cold concrete floor of Corridor D, fingers twitching, lips moving like he was whispering a name. The cameras had gone dark only 6 minutes earlier, short enough to raise suspicion, long enough for something catastrophic to happen. When the first investigators arrived, they noticed the silence. Pelican Bay always felt heavy, but today the air used pressure. The walls felt closer. Even the guards looked uneasy, as if they knew something had been brewing for months but didn't want to say it out loud. Detective Erin Morales, called in from Del Norte County, walked the hall with a pen light. The SHU was a world designed to erase sound. No talking, no movement, no daylight. But today, a pattern was scrawled on the wall in what looked like blood. A shape, a symbol, a broken circle with 3 slashes carved through it. Morales froze. She'd seen that symbol before. It was rumored to belong to a covert prison faction, one so dangerous that even known gang leaders feared it. A group that didn't care about race, territory, or power. They cared about one thing only, eliminating traitors. But officially, that group didn't exist. At least, that's what the Department of Corrections insisted for years. Morales snapped a photo. "Who had access to this corridor tonight?" she asked. "Only one inmate," the warden replied, "and is not supposed to leave his cell without 6 officers escorting him." The inmate's name was Santos Rivas, a high-ranking member of a notorious California street gang known for orchestrating hits from inside prison walls. He'd been transferred to Pelican Bay 2 years earlier after investigators tied him to a cluster of coordinated attacks across Los Angeles. Rivas had denied everything, every charge, every allegation, and he'd spent the last 23 months in solitary confinement for safety concerns. His disciplinary record had been spotless the entire time. No contraband, no misbehavior, no communication with known gang members, which made the current situation impossible. Because the footage from the minutes before the cameras cut out showed his cell door open. Who authorized movement for Rivas? Morales asked sharply. "We're still checking," the warden said, swallowing. "According to the logs, no one." Morales stepped closer to Officer Mercer's body. His uniform was torn, his radio smashed, and on his forearm was another smear of blood, this one shaped like a small arrow pointing downward. "Did Mercer have issues with any inmates?" she asked. The silence from the prison staff spoke louder than words. Pelican Bay had a reputation. Officers didn't talk much. Secrets were currency, and sometimes those secrets were more dangerous than the inmates themselves. As Mercer was rushed to a helicopter for emergency transport, Morales ordered the SHU to be locked down. Every cell, every corridor, every entry point sealed tight. She walked toward Rivas' cell. The door stood open, its lock mechanism intact, as if someone with clearance had released it manually. Inside, the cell was spotless, bed made, floor clean, stainless steel sink gleaming. But on the mattress, she found something chilling. A folded piece of paper. Inside was one sentence. "You're looking in the wrong place." Morales felt her stomach turn. Was it a threat? A confession? A warning? Before she could process it, a sergeant ran up behind her. "Detective," he said, catching his breath, "we found something in the control room." Morales followed him swiftly down the corridor. The control room was supposed to be the safest spot in the SHU, armored glass, multiple keycard access points, and constant surveillance. But today, one of the consoles was smashed to pieces. Exposed wires sparked like angry insects. "How did someone get in here?" Morales asked. "No idea," the sergeant replied, but then he pointed to something under the console. A second note. This one had only 2 words. "Check below." Morales' pulse kicked hard. Below what? Below the console? Below the SHU? Below the entire prison? She crouched down, lifted the torn edge of the floor panel, and shined her light into the dark gap beneath. At first she saw nothing. Then she froze. There, staring back at her, was something she could not possibly explain, and it would change everything they thought they knew about Pelican Bay. Morales steadied her breathing and angled the flashlight deeper into the gap beneath the floor. The narrow crawl space was meant only for wiring, no larger than a suitcase. Yet somehow, impossibly, someone had managed to stash something inside. A small metal box. Old, rusted, with a faded state property seal on its lid. The sergeant crouched beside her. What is that? Some kind of storage container. Morales shook her head slowly. Not storage. Evidence. She slid her fingers under the edge and pried it up. The box was heavier than it looked, the metal cold enough to sting her hands. She set it on the floor and unlatched the corroded clips. Inside were dozens of folded papers, each marked with the same symbol smeared on the SHU wall, a broken circle with 3 slashes. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part was the signatures, names of correctional officers. Dozens of them, some active, some retired, a few listed as deceased. Yet Morales wasn't convinced all those deaths had been natural. The sergeant skimmed a page. These look like confessions. Not confessions, Morales murmured. These are agreements. Agreements to what? A quiet dread spread across her chest, the kind that tells a detective they are stepping into a case far larger than anyone expected. Before she could inspect further, a voice crackled through the radio. Detective Morales, this is Central Control. We need you in the yard. Now. The tone said everything. Something else had gone wrong. Morales snapped the metal box shut. Lock this in evidence immediately, she ordered. No one touches it. The sergeant nodded and hurried down the corridor while Morales rushed toward the yard. She passed through automated gates, each slamming shut behind her with metallic finality. Pelican Bay's walls loomed tall, swallowing the gray daylight. When she stepped into the open air, she instantly understood the urgency. Santos Rivas was missing. Explain, Morales demanded, striding up to the cluster of guards surrounding an open yard enclosure. He was brought out for a medical check, a lieutenant said. 2 officers escorted him. Standard protocol. And in less than 90 seconds, he was gone. Gone, Morales snapped. You mean escaped? No, the lieutenant's eyes were haunted. I mean vanished. Morales stared at him, incredulous. No one vanished from Pelican Bay. Not from the SHU. Not from a yard surrounded by gun towers and concrete walls thicker than highway barriers. She stepped inside the enclosure. The space was bare. Concrete floor, steel fencing overhead, nothing more than a cage for an inmate to breathe fresh air. There were no blind spots, no tunnels, no doors besides the one still guarded by officers. But in the corner, Morales spotted something on the ground. A small piece of metal. A keycard, one used only by staff. And on the back was a symbol. Broken circle. 3 slashes. Her mind raced. Someone inside the prison was moving pieces like a chess master, opening a cell door without authorization, taking down security cameras, assaulting an officer without being detected, and now releasing an inmate into thin air. Rivas wasn't just another high-profile prisoner. Someone wanted him alive. Someone wanted him out of reach. Pull the logs from every access point in the last 6 hours, Morales ordered, and get a full roster of staff on duty. I want to know who walked into this unit, who walked out, and who's been anywhere near Rivas. We've already run the logs, the lieutenant said quietly, and he held out a tablet. The logs were blank. Every entry, every timestamp, every code. Erase. How long had they been like this? Morales asked. We don't know, he admitted. We didn't notice until now. She felt the cold tighten around her like a vice. Whoever orchestrated this wasn't improvising. They had knowledge of the prison's infrastructure, its blind spots, its vulnerabilities. This wasn't an inmate operation. This wasn't a gang war. This was internal and deeply organized. A shadow network. Morales glanced back toward the SHU, toward the crawl space where that metal box had been hidden for what could have been months or years. "Detective," a young officer called from near the gate. "We found something else." He handed her a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a tiny piece of a torn photograph. A face, partially burned, only the jaw and mouth visible, but Morales recognized a uniform. It was Officer Kyle Mercer, the same officer fighting for his life in the hospital. "Why would Rivas have this?" the young officer asked. Morales didn't respond. Because the truth forming in her mind was darker than anything she expected when she arrived at Pelican Bay that morning. This wasn't an inmate attacking a guard. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't about gangs. This was about collusion. And someone wanted Mercer silenced. Suddenly her phone buzzed. A text, unknown number. "You're getting close. Check Mercer's locker before they do." Her breath caught. Before who does? She turned toward the main building, heart pounding, knowing whatever was in that locker might blow the entire investigation open, or put her in the same danger as the officer who tried to speak. She didn't wait for backup. She didn't wait for clearance. Morales ran straight into the belly of Pelican Bay, straight into the trap she didn't yet know was waiting. Detective Erin Morales moved through the administrative wing of Pelican Bay with deliberate steps, her pulse thundering as she approached the row of officer lockers. The hallway was empty, too empty. Even the hum of the overhead lights sounded louder today, as if the entire prison were holding its breath. She stopped in front of Kyle Mercer's locker. Number 114. No lock, no dent, no scratch. Completely ordinary, which somehow made it more ominous. The text message still glowed on her phone. "Check Mercer's locker before they do." Whoever sent it knew things. Knew her movements. Knew she'd seen the box. Knew the internal logs were wiped. She didn't trust the silent hallway. She didn't trust the cameras overhead. Not here, not now. But she opened the locker anyway. Inside was a neatly folded uniform and a small black notebook. She reached for it, hands steady, though her heartbeat felt like it was climbing into her throat. She flipped it open. Names, dates, locations within the prison. Some were coded, but others needed no explanation. Officer walk schedules, door override codes, restricted access keys. And next to many of these entries were initials, inmate numbers, and large red circles around certain dates. One of those dates was today. Morales read the first full page, and her stomach twisted. Mercer hadn't been a target. He had been part of it. A participant, a facilitator, and maybe a liability. She turned to the next page. It was different, scribbled, rushed handwriting. Mercer's last entry before he was attacked. "Can't do this anymore. Someone needs to know. Rivas wasn't supposed to be involved. They'll kill him. They're everywhere, even in the SHU. If something happens to me, check sublevel 3. Morales froze. Sublevel 3 did not exist on any official map. Before she could process the meaning, footsteps echoed from down the hall. She snapped the notebook shut and tucked it into her jacket. 2 officers rounded the corner. Their eyes tracked her every movement. "Detective," one of them said, "we were told you'd be here." Morales forced her voice to remain steady, just following up on Mercer's incident. "Warden wants to see you," the other said. "Immediately." The way he said it wasn't a request. It was an escort. Morales nodded, hands relaxed at her sides, pretending to comply. But as they walked, she noticed something unnerving. Neither officer's radio was on. At the end of the hall, they headed toward a stairwell, not the direction of the warden's office at all. Her instincts roared. This was a setup. As the first officer reached for the stairwell door, Morales acted. She pivoted, shoving the second officer off balance and slamming him against the wall. The first officer lunged toward her, but she dropped low, swept his leg, and sent him crashing to floor. She bolted, down the corridor, turning left, then right. Alarms were still silent, which told her everything. Whoever these men reported didn't want alarms. They wanted her to disappear just like Rivas. She raced toward the SHU access elevator, the one only high-level personnel could use. She swiped the emergency clearance card the lieutenant had given her earlier and prayed the override system wasn't compromised. The elevator doors slid open. She stepped inside, slammed the close button, and exhaled shakily. Only then did she look at the panel. There it was, a button that shouldn't exist. Sublevel 3. Her breath stalled. She pressed it. The descent was slow, mechanical, and cold. When the doors opened, the lights flickered to life one by one, casting long shadows across a hidden corridor. This was no official wing of Pelican Bay. The architecture was older, the walls reinforced, the temperature much colder. It felt like something built decades ago and forgotten, or deliberately raised. She followed the corridor until she reached a heavy steel door. On it was spray-painted the same symbol again, the broken circle with 3 slashes. Her hand hovered over the handle. Then she heard it, a voice from the other side of the door. Weak, strained. Help, please. Morales pulled the door open. Her breath caught. Inside the dim room was Santos Rivas, handcuffed to a chair, face swollen, clearly beaten, but alive. He lifted his head slowly. They were going to kill me, he rasped. I didn't attack Mercer. I tried to warn him. Morales stepped closer. Warn him about what? Rivas' eyes were filled with a fear she'd never seen in hardened inmates. There's a group of officers running this place, he whispered. Not just 1 or 2. A whole network. They decide who gets protection, who gets punished, who disappears. They've been doing it for years. Morales felt the truth settle over her like ice. Mercer hadn't been part of the conspiracy. He'd been trying to expose it. And someone silenced him. Before she could respond, a loud metallic click echoed behind her. Morales turned slowly. Standing in the doorway were 3 officers, one holding a gun, one holding a keycard, and one wearing a calm, chilling smile. The warden. I warned them, he said, stepping into the room. You're too good at your job, detective. Too curious. Morales pulse-hammered. The warden continued. Pelican Bay can't function without order. Our order. What you found today is bigger than a few bad actors. He raised a gun. Morales backed toward Rivas, mind racing for any opening, any advantage. But there was none. Then suddenly, a sound erupted above them, a distant explosion. The lights flickered. The ground shook. The warden turned sharply, distracted just long enough. Morales lunged. She tackled him, the gun clattering across the floor. Rivas kicked his chair, knocking one officer off balance. Another reached for his radio. Chaos filled the room. Morales grabbed the fallen gun, breath ragged, as more footsteps thundered down the hall. She aimed at the ceiling pipe above the officers and fired. Steam exploded into the room. Blinding, scalding, deafening. Morales dragged Rivas out through the haze, through the corridor, through the elevator, and toward the only exit she still trusted, the front gate. Hours later, as state investigators flooded Pelican Bay and escorted multiple officers away in handcuffs, Morales stood beside an ambulance where paramedics tended to Rivas. He looked up at her weakly. You saved me. No, she replied quietly. You helped expose them. As the sun set behind the razor-wire fence, Morales watched the prison silhouette in the orange glow. A fortress meant to contain the worst of humanity, but hiding a darkness far worse than the inmates it held. 3 days later, while reviewing recovered files in her office, Morales received a new message from the same unknown number. This one contained only 1 sentence. You expose 1 chapter. But the story isn't over. Attached was a photo. Another prison. Another symbol. Another secret waiting in the shadows. She exhaled slowly. Subscribe, she whispered to herself. Because the next story is darker than this one.